Hi there, students. Without a stitch on. He had not a stitch on. Without a stitch on, he was naked. So she ran out of the bathroom without a stitch on. Absolutely naked. Okay, this stitch is to do with sewing. Each time you do this, this is a stitch. So not a stitch on. Not a stitch, without any clothes. I don't have a stitch to wear to the party tonight. I don't have any clothes at all. Okay, I walked into the living room to discover my dad without a stitch on. Okay, so without a stitch on, completely nude, not wearing any articles of clothing whatsoever. I went into the kitchen and there was my roommate without a stitch on. Yeah, I nearly fainted with embarrassment. There were young children, young toddlers on the beach running around without a stitch on. But then I'm sure later they got sunburnt. So naked as the day they were born. Yeah, they let their baby run around outside without a stitch on. Yeah, not to have a stitch on, not to have any clothes on at all, not a stitch of clothing on his body. So without clothes, neither of them had a stitch of clothing. On. They were completely naked. So yes, I went to this beach, and then and there were people there without a stitch on, and then I discovered that it was a nudist beach. Okay, so not a stitch, without any clothes, not wearing any clothes at all. Yeah, the stitch is referring to a piece of clothing. So without a stitch on, completely naked, as naked as the day you were born. You can say, I don't have a stitch to wear. This means I've got nothing suitable to wear for the occasion. And if you don't have a stitch on, then you're not actually wearing anything at all. So in the buff, in the altogether, in the nude, in your birthday suit, completely undressed, unclothed, bare, absolutely stark naked, bare-skinned, au naturel, butt naked, as they say. So completely naked, without any clothes on at all. Okay, so not to have a stitch on, to be completely naked, to be completely without clothes. So notice the on is important, because to have on, so I have a t-shirt on. If I don't have a stitch on, I don't have any clothes on, I have nothing to wear. So the presenters of the weather program present it without a stitch of clothing. Yeah. Okay, a boy without a stitch of clothing ran into the garden and shouted hello. Okay, so he was he was lying in his garden without a stitch on, soaking up the sun. Okay, so bathe when you find a good place to go bathing in the river, to go swimming. So you go swimming without a stitch on, without any clothes on. I've got a picture of you sitting in the garden without a stitch on, but you are, well, rather young in it. A beautiful painting of Apollo with the Muses, in which the god Apollo is asleep, and there are all of these discarded female garments, while the Muses dance down a hill without a stitch on, without any clothes on, completely naked. So, formality without a stitch on. I think I'm going to give it a 4 in formality, using an informal conversation, semi-formal conversation, semi-formal writing, but stop there. And the stitch is talking about the clothes. So, without a stitch on. Not have a stitch on.